This video was made possible by my lovely patrons. If you would like to support videos like this one, consider supporting me for as low as $3 a month for behind the scenes stuff and other rewards. Link in the description. The following contains discussions about legal matters. I'm not a lawyer, and the following is not legal advice. The following episode contains moments of bear rage. Viewer discretion is advised.
Hello, my gummy bears. My name is Jordan, also known as CJ, and welcome back to Jordan's Soapbox, the show that talks about anything that I want to talk about. Ow! Oh, the Lara-Su Chronicles, Beginnings. I never thought this book would even exist. When I made that video talking about it a while back, I assumed it never would exist. Yet, here it is. I think this thing is a mistake. And cursed! The Lara-Su Chronicles Beginnings is a collection of several stories that made up Mobius 25 years later, alongside Penders' created material The Storm and Shattered Tomorrows. If you need a refresher on the entire situation with Ken Penders, I recommend watching my video talking about him in Does Ken Penders Own Anything? But Beginnings is essentially a collection of previously published material with new stuff thrown in. It's notable as it's the first re-release of anything related to Archie Sonic since its cancellation in 2017, and the result is easily one of the worst pieces of Sonic the Hedgehog media ever created. That's surprising. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Let's start with the reprints of Mobius 25 years later. When Beginnings was first announced, I speculated there could be major differences between the originally published versions and those featured in the collection due to legal considerations and Penders' bad headcanons. But to my utter shock, this is mostly not the case. It includes no changes from the originally published versions of these stories I could find. Outside of this one panel, for some reason, it just really looks weird. Like, why is this like this? Why? And the ending for The Die Is Cast. And, for the record, that ending for The Die Is Cast is absolutely non-essential to anything that's really related to this book. So we'll be moving on. It includes all the stories originally featured in 25 years later. It also features the original cover for Sonic the Hedgehog 131, but does not feature any other covers 25 years later was featured in. This is likely because the other covers didn't really have an emphasis on that story, which is understandable. But otherwise, it's mostly 25 years later in its original form, train wreck and all. I'll talk about it one day in full on Jordan's Soapbox. I already did talk about the first part of that story, which you can watch here. But there are some problems with these collected issues. Let's start with how those comics are presented in Beginnings. While the book itself is of decent physical quality, I noticed the comics themselves look superb for a collection like this. They certainly didn't look like direct scans from the comic, but instead digitalized and remastered. When I asked Ken Penders on Twitter about the origins of the older issues, he stated an individual provided the scans. Enter that alleged individual, whom I will only refer to as Alex, although they very much have made themselves public about this. Alex claims they were the ones who provided the material to Penders. Now, a bit of context. I was formerly mutuals with Alex, albeit I didn't really talk to him. He was a member of a server I was a part of for Archie Sonic Forever. He was promoting his involvement in that server with Beginnings before leaving said server and later being banned, as the mods were not interested in having this work promoted. Alex sent me a friend request and I accepted it. Because he brought the subject up first, I started to ask him about his involvement with the book. Alex claims his material was taken from the Archie Sonic mobile application existing back when Archie Comics held a license to Sonic. These scans were then uploaded to a website called TailsKicks, which hosts illegal downloads of Archie Sonic comics and other related Sonic material. The scans uploaded to TailsKicks, according to Alex, were provided to Penders for Beginnings. While Alex was not initially compensated for this, nor requested to be, he was later given $100 USD for this. When I followed up with a question to Penders asking if it was Alex who provided these materials, he has not responded as of this recording. There is evidence provided by Alex that confirmed his involvement. His name is featured in the special thanks section. and he did post a PayPal transaction from a Kenneth Penders. I almost remember him providing me text messages as well that were sent between them and Penders, but I couldn't find them and they could have been deleted. But I did not have any other information about the usage of TailsKicks for Beginnings. That's when someone who almost absolutely was involved in the development of Beginnings reached out to me. At their request, they asked to remain anonymous to avoid financial hardship on themselves and their family as a result of discussing the matter. And I'm very much inclined to honor that. To protect their privacy, I'll be calling them the individual moving forward. They provided a ton of information regarding the behind-the-scenes issues with this book. Way too much to put in this one video. But I was focused on one question. Was Alex involved with Beginnings? Going back to Alex claim that the Mobius 25 Years Later pages are scans for a website called TailsKicks. I know of the site, but for the Mobius 25 Years Later, I have no proof if those pages he, Ken Penders, sent me came from said site. Under speculation, you could point at issues 135, 136 that might have come from such a place because some of the pages for said issues had weird color rectangles at the top. I asked him about this and he didn't give me a clear answer apart from saying it had something to do with copyright protection. In hindsight, that should have been a red flag. After doing some homework when I dug into TailsKicks, those weird color rectangles were at the top of the pages. After doing more research into the matter, TailsKicks back in the days when Archie Comics used to have a Sonic app where you could buy all the old Sonic comics and the most recent ones at the time, someone went into the app, ripped out all of the pages, and uploaded those pages to their website, which are still there to this day. I only started looking into this more because later pages sent to me were at a DPI PPI of 75, which is the rate needed to look good on a computer, phone, or anything with a screen to view an image or page. So we don't have full confirmation, but I think there's strong enough evidence to suggest it. Alex is the one who provided Ken Penders scans from TailsKicks, Penders knowing where they came from. Penders sent this information to the individual, not knowing their origin. I must stress that these are allegations, but allegations that have credible evidence behind it. And if these allegations are true, it would make it a legally and morally disgusting situation. If these digitally remastered scans are from the long discontinued Archie Sonic comic app, it would likely require some level of circumvention of the app to obtain the scans necessary. I doubt the application allowed users to simply download titles for use other than the app, but there's little to no information I could find about how it existed back then. Under section 1201, and no, I'm not going to say all that, wow, that is a lot of words, it is unlawful to, quote, circumvent a technological measure that effectively controls access to a work protected under this title. If circumvention was used, it would make it unlawful to obtain, likely let alone use, these scans, especially for a commercial project. While it doesn't entirely dismiss fair use cases, I mean, come on, how is fair use even applicable here? I certainly wouldn't think so. Even if circumvention was not used, it's still using scans from a damn website facilitating piracy of Sonic the Hedgehog media for a commercially sold book. So let's say all this is true, and the material did come from TailsKicks. Penders, of course, will likely claim he owns the issues in full, so who cares where he got it from? But this is another problem with 25 years later. It features characters indisputably owned by Sega. This includes Sonic, Knuckles, the Freedom Fighters, and the Chaotix. It's true these versions are the 25 years later variants, but normal versions are also featured, and the future versions of these characters are virtually indistinguishable from their normal counterparts. I mean, look at them side by side, come on. He doesn't definitively own any characters outside of Particle, as we've established in Does Ken Penders Own Anything? His copyright registrations mostly focus on artwork for individual issues, never characters in these stories. Those claims were not even solved in Archie vs. Ken Penders. It reached a settlement, and Archie never acknowledged Penders' claims over these characters. In fact, they still reprinted issues featuring his characters even post-Super Genesis wave. He also doesn't own the Sonic the Hedgehog logo, the Sega logo, and the Archie Comics logo featured on that one cover he used. Oops. That also leads to a question I asked when this was first announced. Did Penders seek the permission of the other contributors who also worked on 25 years later? I've been unable to get in contact with the majority due to a lack of a contactable method or an inactive social media. But I did manage to have one former contributor talk to me about it. I will withhold the name of the contributor at their request, and I ultimately decided not to share what was said other than they're not involved. The individual did have this to say. Also, Jim and Steven's names were meant to be on the front cover of the book, but were removed at their request. I do not know why their names were on the front and why they got removed. Maybe they didn't want to be tied to this project, but that's just speculation. I believe that if you do not have the consent of everyone involved with the work, you shouldn't be reprinting it. It leads me to wonder if other contributors blessed the reprint or were unresponsive. It is unlikely to me Penders sought the almost necessary permissions from Sega Archie Comics or other folks who worked on Mobius 25 years later. But I don't have a definitive answer on the latter, or even the earlier, really. It should also be noted that Penders allegedly did not pay the individual for their work on Beginnings, only assuring them financial compensation. If they worked on his next book would they receive financial compensation, which has happened. Still, if that's true, you Ken Penders. You. So, we have morally and potentially legally dubious reprints of older issues, but what about the new stuff? Let's move along to two additional stories created by Penders. The Storm and Shatter Tomorrows. The Storm is a side story featuring Jeffrey St. John. The Storm is honestly very difficult to summarize story-wise because it is utterly incoherent and also very boring, but I'll try my best. A character named Insane Brownie, a character name that is hilarious, is delivering a report to Jeffrey St. John. After some suspicion from Jeffrey, he claims she is a spy and pulls a gun on her, proving that in any reality, he's just simply an. Also, during their conversation, Insane Brownie's design changes for absolutely no reason. Why? They're interrupted by Remington, who contacts Jeffrey to discuss events affecting the space-time continuum. While this conversation is happening, Vanguard 1 containing Knuckles, or Nox, I'm just gonna call them Knuckles, thank you everybody, Lara-Su, Kobar, and the Emissary are on a mission to investigate a strange thunderstorm. The Vanguard 1 encounters turbulence, and another character joins in this boring-as-hell phone call named Dr. Zephyr. Zephyr explains there is something wrong, pointing out how a patient ended up having 2 sets of chromosomes and how there's a missing second on all lab records. Riveting. The two sides are no closer to figuring out what's going on, but agree to stay in clandestine contact. Well, that's several minutes of my life I'm not getting back. It's boring, stretched out, the artwork's awful, yeah, you can kind of see the problems right away. Shatter Tomorrows, however, is somehow worse. Shatter Tomorrows opens with the words, Cronin 37, post-cataclysm. What on earth is a Cronin? Oh, it's actually a scientific concept related to a quantum of time as part of a theory that time isn't continuous. You think he just Googled that to make it sound cooler? It actually opens with Lara-Su on a beach that looks like a photograph. You are going to notice a lot of this in Shatter Tomorrows. It was also present in The Storm. Listen, I suck at making backgrounds. I know how hard they are. But you have to add some stylization to make environments complement the drawn elements. That is not what happens here. It makes it look completely awful. Made worse by the fact that many of these backgrounds feature multiple images smashed together, making it look worse. The drawn elements don't look much better, switching art styles in the same panel. It also ranges from decent to Okay, I'm gonna have 5 nightmares singing that. Anyway, Lara-Su laments at the loss of her father. We then cut to a couple years, I'm not calling it Cronins, later to a man named Michael. No, it's spelled Michael, because it has to be needlessly distinct. He's visiting an unnamed planet for signs of life, although given his eyes, I don't think there's any life in there anyway. They discuss how space is a crapsack environment as Michael asks if it's, quote, "we come in peace but shoot to kill." When the voice agrees, Michael comments how, "that's a hell of a prime directive," with the voice responding that's what they learned at the academy if they don't want to end up as a, quote, "red shirt." Get it? Because Ken Penders worked on Star Trek? Ugh. Deep Space Nine did not die for this garbage. He finds abandoned living quarters on the planet with strange furniture. Honestly, not really out of place at IKEA. And a transmission from Lara-Su. Through Lara-Su, we have a recap of the events of Mobius 25 years later. Of course, it's awful artwork that makes you wish you were reading the collected issues in this book. Unhelpful is the fact that there is a boom echidna nudity! I am not kidding, my eyes are burning, and there's more of it! In this alternate universe that is canon over my dead body, the events of Mobius 25 years later resulted in a rewrite of the space-time continuum. It resulted in a different design for Lara-Su, among other changes, before the space-time continuum was reset again. None of this information is adequately explained here, but instead the data files section of the book, which are pretty awful. There apparently was better designs proposed, but Penders didn't use them. Long story short. Regardless, your story should be able to adequately explain events and conduct world building without the need for additional material. Even with those data files, it's still confusing what events even are transpiring. Lara-Su embarks with her father, Kobar, and the emissary on a mission of scientific importance as seen in the storm. The mission goes horribly wrong, with Lara-Su saying "fark" as if it was a swear word. I mean, listen, this book already has swearing in it, the storm has some mild language, and I mean, there's gosh darn nudity in it, so you might as well say what we're all thinking reading this. Along with demanding a refund, Cobalt is gravely injured, Knuckles is missing, and the emissary being the only survivor unscathed. Saber attempts to guide Lara-Su out of it before losing contact with Lara-Su after a vision of Knuckles appears, leaving the story on a cliffhanger. We do have a sneak peek of future stories in this wretched universe that I'm absolutely issuing an exterminatus order for. The Lara-Su Chronicles Beginnings is a terrible book featuring potentially morally, legally dubious reprints and just awful new content. It has been rightfully critically derided online, and from my understanding sold poorly. But that isn't stopping Penders. He apparently wants to republish the entire Archie Sonic line of comics, but someone on Twitter rightfully clarified if he meant before Ian Flynn took over. He stated because of the issues with Robo Robotnik, he has ownership of the entire series. Yeah, I have an absolutely hard time believing that one. But Penders will continue to agitate with this, and will do the same song and dance until Sega or Archie Comics or both finally sue him and put an end to this nightmare once and for all. But that's incredibly unlikely. Lawyers cost money. Lots of it. Disney doesn't take any threat of lawsuit seriously unless the other party engages lawyers who actually file a lawsuit with the costs. And considering how Sega responded when asked about the Freedom Fighters by Sonic Stadium, it's incredibly unlikely Sega cares enough to legally pursue Penders, despite the catastrophic impact this has on the Sonic the Hedgehog image and brand. I have therefore a different solution, other than simply telling you, don't buy this thing. Which, don't. It deserves to be thrown in the trash, burnt, and maybe used as toilet paper. I'll leave that up to you. Penders will just continue to do what he does, doomed to be mocked and ridiculed forever for his disastrous interpretations of Archie Sonic. Honestly, I think that's punishment enough. But if Sega truly does not care enough to enforce its copyrights and trademarks with these comics, then the entirety of Archie Sonic now belongs to us. You and me. I mean, if Penders is allowed to do what he does, then what's stopping us from creating our own stories with Archie Sonic? We could create fan fiction, fan art, fan continuations, and so much more. There's already so much out there already, and continuing to add to this library will drown out whatever Penders makes now or in the future. And I would love to see him try to stop that. I know it can be daunting at first. Maybe that first drawing won't be the best. Maybe that first story might suck, and maybe that voice acting may have some audio issues. But I would encourage you to keep at it. And if you aren't the creative type, you can still support folks' creative endeavors in multiple ways with Archie Sonic. Either way, you're being conscripted. I'm sorry I wasn't able to ask you, but the future of Archie Sonic does depend on it. I hope you understand. Get out there, create, and support folks in this community. I'm counting on y'all. I'm going to be covering some of these projects over the next couple of months to shine a spotlight on much, much better things that are worth your time and energy. We can together make Penders' awful interpretation of this franchise nothing more than what it is. A terrible joke that deserves to be mercilessly ridiculed. Because if we have to live in the copyright anarchy of Ken Penders, then let anarchy reign.